The Washington Commanders fall to the Kansas City Chiefs 28-7. We're going to be talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss against the Kansas City Chiefs. And so I always like to start with the theme of the game. These are essentially points that really describe what we saw in tonight's game. And so I have 2 points that really come to mind in this one. And so the first one being missed opportunities for the Washington Commanders on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. And so starting with the opening drive for the Washington Commanders, they were moving the football well. It looked like that they were going to go ahead and get an early score. Marcus Mariota throws the ball to Deebo Samuel. It hits off his helmet and then goes into the air and falls into a Kansas City Chiefs defender's hands. And it's an interception to start off the game. And so a missed opportunity there in the opening drive. And then, through the first 2 quarters, the Washington Commanders had 4 possessions that all crossed the 50-yard line of the Kansas City Chiefs, and they really didn't have anything to show for that. And so they did not score like they should have with the way that they were moving the football. And then next, on the defensive side of the ball, the defense was able to get the turnovers for the Washington Commanders offense, but the offense was unable to take advantage of that. And so just some missed opportunities there because the defense was able to come up with stops that they needed, but then the complementary football was not there on offense. And then other missed opportunities outside of the turnovers and another thing that kind of comes to mind out of this one is just the 0 of 2 on 4th down. And so the Commanders were unable to convert on 4th down. And so missed opportunities there. And then when you look at just the mistakes for both teams, the Chiefs, they had 9 penalties for 95 yards. And the Washington Commanders were actually the more disciplined team in this game. As you see, they had 3 penalties for 35 yards. And so they were unable to really take advantage of the Kansas City Chiefs' mistakes here with the 9 penalties for 95 yards. And so once again, more missed opportunities for the Washington Commanders tonight. Then next, just looking at point number 2 in this game is just that the offense just really could not get any scores. I think that was just one of the things that was probably a real head scratcher here because, it just seemed like that the Washington Commanders were going to be able to score some points. I thought that Marcus Mariota, for the most part, played pretty well, and I think that the offense was it was clicking. It just never got to a position where they were capitalizing and scoring touchdowns today. And so, I think that was point number 2. In fact, when you look at the stats here for this one, the Commanders had 260 yards, and you will see that 200 yards came via the air and then 60 yards via the ground game today. And so that's just not good enough here for the Washington Commanders, which is another issue with the balance, which we're going to talk about that here in a moment. So the offense just really couldn't get things going. And then, lastly, this is a point that just coming out of this game, the injuries for the Washington Commanders as they continue to stack up. And so, one of the things that I saw in this one is that Terry McLaurin was on the sidelines. He was kind of rubbing his quad there. And so we know that he's been out due to the quad. And so hopefully, he didn't have a setback in this game. He was able to score a touchdown. Then also, too, Laramie Tunsil, he had a hamstring injury early on. He did come back to the game. And then I think the second half, he is completely out of the pads and everything else. And so he was on the sideline. He was not able to go the rest of the game. And then later in the game too, Javon Kinlaw, it looks like that they wrapped his arm. And so I'm not sure, what the injury is with him. And so we'll find out some more about that, I'm sure, as the week goes along. But it looks like that the Washington Commanders also suffered some more injuries in this game. And so now just kind of jumping into the box score and looking at some of the key takeaways here for the Washington Commanders. And so starting with the ground game. And so the ground game, it just really wasn't that good today. And so I believe that Marcus Mariota actually was one of the better rushers for us today. Actually, he was the best rusher on the ground. So he had 8 carries for 28 yards. And so he led the way. When you look at some of the stuff that Bill had on the ground, he had some good opportunities, but I'm not sure that he necessarily got enough. So 9 carries, 25 yards, only 2.8 for the average for him. Jeremy McNichols, he had a carry, so 1 carry for 4 yards. And then Chris Rodriguez Jr., 1 carry for 2 yards. And then when you look at the passing game for the Washington Commanders, I think that this was also interesting because I just talked about Terry McLaurin, who did come back and he did get a touchdown in this game. It was a great touchdown catch that he had with the toe taps and everything else because it needed to go to the booth to review it. They were going to take away the touchdown, but they ultimately went ahead and reversed the call and gave him the touchdown. But just 3 receptions in this one, 54 yards, 18 was his average. He had the 1 touchdown. And then the leader as far as leading us in receptions today was Jeremy McNichols. He had a couple big plays in this game. So 5 receptions, 64 yards. And I thought that that was interesting considering all the pass catchers that the Washington Commanders had in this game. Deebo Samuel had 3 catches, only 11 yards in this game. Ben Sinnott, he had a splash play, 1 reception, 22 yards. John Bates, 1 reception, 22 yards. And even Luke McCaffrey looked pretty good. He had a very nice sideline catch in this one, 3 receptions, 24 yards. Would have liked to see him get some more. Jalen Lane really never got into things because he had, I think, a pretty tough drop. I know it was kind of a little bit of a scramble drill, but still it was a drop. And then also, too, there was a special teams play as well where he ended up not catching the football, and then it ended up just kind of going off into the sidelines there, and the Commanders had to start pretty deep in their own territory. And so, just a tough night for him. And so just offensively, I felt like the balance was off for the Washington Commanders. Again, just going back to the stat sheet there, 200 passing yards to 60 on the ground. And it just felt like, the Commanders, when they got behind, they really had to just abandon the running game. So even though, there were 20 carries in this game for the team, it just still didn't feel like a good balance there. And so next, I think some other keys out of this one, with the defense. And so I thought that the defense played well initially to start off. And then, the defense just really, you just can't hold Patrick Mahomes that long. And so I think that if the Commanders were able to maybe take advantage of the turnovers that they got, because Bobby Wagner, he had a nice interception on a tipped pass. Then also, too, Marshawn Lattimore had a very nice pick where the Chiefs were getting ready to go down and score there. And so it was a nice turn and look back for the football. He got an interception. And then, there was an opportunity to get a third turnover in this game where Marshawn Lattimore could have possibly got a fumble. He didn't fall on it. He was trying to pick it up, and the Chiefs recovered that. And so I think right now I saw a stat where they've had 8 fumbles on the year, and they've recovered all of them. And so that just goes into a bit of the luck that you have to have in this game. And so unfortunately, I just think that the defense played well. They just couldn't hold long enough. I think that when you look at Travis Kelce, he was able to get some chunk plays out there. Xavier Worthy got some chunk plays. And then I felt like that Patrick Mahomes, really, he just got into his groove. I think that they were saying, like, man, he looked like he was playing baseball out there at times with the way that he was just making those type of throws, off balance and everything else, and just hitting receivers for big plays. And so just this Commanders defense just couldn't hold long enough. I thought that they did a good job too. Jacob Martin, he was able to go out there and get a sack. They were able to get a bunch of negative plays as far as just getting the Chiefs into some minus plays, but still just were not able to really turn the corner as a defense in this one. And so anyway, this is a tough loss for the Washington Commanders as they now fall to 3-5. They now have the Detroit Lions coming up next year. And so the Commanders are going to have to try to figure something out. We'll be talking a little bit more about the injury updates around the Washington Commanders. You guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking as far as the key takeaway from tonight's game. Again, just a tough one for the Washington Commanders. And so, as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.